สวัสดีครับ I'm Point from ค้นพบ Let's talk about arguments. The thing here is this: you can never truly win an argument. As a matter of fact, you always end up only losing. You always end up losing more than you think you can gain. And an argument, you see, is one of the quickest ways for you to unwisely make a new enemy for yourself. Whether that argument is with a friend, a family member, a romantic partner, a colleague, an employee, or a boss, right? Oftentimes, we end up converting that opponent into a new enemy. And we don't have to do that. We can avoid that. Most times we can avoid that, right? Now, you may say this. You may say that, well, what do you mean? I have facts, figures, numbers, and evidence. And my ability to communicate my viewpoint very eloquently demonstrates clearly why they are wrong and why I am right, why they have mistaken, where they have mistaken. And look, I've done this many times, and I even get them to agree with me that they are wrong and that I'm right. So what's the purpose? What's the value here? The thing is this: you may have that victory indeed, but that victory is going to be a very empty victory, because what you have done is you have lost the other person's goodwill. You have lost the other person's goodwill. And a goodwill is one of the most important things, if not the most important things, when it comes to influencing people and winning friends, building meaningful connections. You see, when you take that direct approach, arguing like that, oftentimes our temper, not only does it get the better of us, but we also have a personal drive in it, a personal sense of satisfaction. And in doing so, these arguments often go messy in ways that we may not even be aware of. Say our tone of voice, our body language, our gesture, our demeanor, our looks can communicate to them a very big sense of judgment, right? Much more effectively even than what you can say verbally. And when you do that, what you're doing is you are hurting the other person's precious pride. You are hurting their vital sense of importance. And as I talked about previously in the past few videos, we all have a longing desire. It's even like it's a craving and a desire to feel great, to feel important, to have a sense of pride, right? And you're just hurting that. Not only are you hurting that, you are also directly insulting the other person's intelligence, insulting their judgment, making them feel inferior, and hurting their feelings. So, yes, they may agree that they were wrong, they were mistaken, but they will resent your victory, they will resent you, and you will have lost their goodwill. So this shows an interesting aspect of our human nature. Again, we tend to think that we are creatures of logic, but in practice, we're actually creatures of emotions. We're very emotional, and we're filled with prejudices, preconceived notions, biases that we're not aware of, jealousy, envy, pride, suspicion, fear. All these things fill us in ways that we're not aware of, right? And also, this goes into the ego structure. What's interesting to note is oftentimes we humans, we are so attached to our ideas, to our beliefs, to our facts. We cling on to them so dearly, so much, right? And I've talked about the ego before many times, but to sum it up again quickly is the ego, think of it as this your me structure, the structure of who you think you are, who you feel you are, who you believe you are. It's your self-image, it's your self-concept. It is an idea, a concept, an imagination about who you think and feel you are that lives inside your mind, right? It's abstract. But yet the ego also includes everything that you identify with. Everything that you identify with, even thoughts, ideas, beliefs, and facts. This is important because if you see how this connects to your ego structure, you can begin to see how this connects to our sense of self, our sense of how we feel important, where we get our feeling of importance from, where we get our feeling of appreciation from, where we get our desire to feel great from, right? These things are all connected. And because we cling on to our facts and beliefs so much, when we get into an argument, those things get put at stake. They get challenged. And if they get challenged in a hostile way, how do you think we are going to react if the other person is accusing us that we are wrong? we're not going to like it. It's a direct attack on our ego. This comes to show the next fact that human beings, we are much best, it's much better to handle somebody else in a more diplomatic way, in a more soft way, right? Save their face. Don't go directly, right? Go indirectly to show them that maybe there's a better opinion or a better fact or a more accurate fact on this issue, on this situation, right? People like to be handled by somebody else who comes off more humble, more courteous, more tactful. And most important is this, that they have and illustrate and demonstrate to you a genuine and sympathetic desire to understand things from your perspective, to understand things from your point of view. And this is very important to stress, because that's one of the causes or reasons why we often get into arguments so quickly, because we're too stuck in our own viewpoints. See, this is much easier said than done, because again, we cling on to our ideas, our beliefs, right? Because they're part of our ego structure, and therefore we're stuck in our own perspectives. We evaluate and we make sense of any situation or any person's belief or anybody's statement or what we are confronted with. We evaluate that from our own judgments, our own preconceived notions. So it's important to develop a skill to first try to understand the other person and do it authentically, do it genuinely, because this will help you diffuse tension and avoid potential arguments, and therefore have a much more constructive debate should you be caught in a disagreement with somebody, and come out of the disagreement earning their respect and their appreciation much more. So to really illustrate this point about being stuck in your opinion, being stuck in your viewpoint, I want to borrow a passage from the book again. This one was written by Carl Rogers, who was an eminent psychologist back in the days. And so here's what he's trying to communicate on this issue. Carl Rogers, the eminent psychologist, wrote in his book on becoming a person, "I have found it of enormous value when I can permit myself to understand the other person. The way in which I have worded this statement may seem strange to you. Is it necessary to permit oneself to understand another? I think it is. Our first reaction to most of the statements which we hear from other people is an evaluation or judgment rather than an understanding of it. When someone expresses some feeling, attitude, or belief, our tendency is almost immediately to feel that's right, or that's stupid, that's abnormal, that's unreasonable, that's incorrect, that's not nice. Very rarely do we permit ourselves to understand precisely what the meaning of the statement is to the other person." So you can see how these things, our egos and our being attached to our own ideas, clinging to our own perspectives, clinging to the way we evaluate and judge the world, this can lead to an argument rather easily. But the idea in this video is that can be avoided if we learn how to handle people with more tactfulness and more diplomatically. So for example, let's say you're caught in disagreement. First of all, your attitude towards a disagreement will strongly shape whether or not that's going to evolve into an argument. So try to welcome a disagreement, right? Even if that person's opinion is completely absurd in your viewpoint, be patient first, because at the very least, the moment you have a disagreement, there's good news in it, because it means that the other person is also taking interest in what you also take interest in. So there's a chance that you can both learn something from the situation, from the interaction, even if you don't agree with each other. So you see, the attitude is first important. Try to look at the disagreement as an opportunity to learn something new. Try to look at the situation that you are both on the same team, even if the other person is uncooperative, or even if their demeanor is, is not friendly and is aggressive and that they want to argue with you. Also try to control your temper first, right? Don't let your first instinct, which is to get upset, get the best of you, right? Realize that your temper is coming, and if you can first get these two principles in line, it'll help you handle them better. Here's how. We have to first realize that the phrases that we use or the wordings that we use when we want to communicate to them our point of view, this can come off either hostile, and arouses opposition, or it can be disarming and promotes cooperation. So, example number 1, a hostile sense of wording would be, I am going to prove to you that. Certainly this is the case. Undoubtedly, right? For sure, I am certain. Without a doubt, right? So see, these ways that you are tempted to say these things, if you notice, the wording in and of itself is very fixed, is unflexible, it's very rigid, and that therefore there is nothing else but this truth that you're about to say. And therefore you are not open to you are not open to negotiation at all, right? It's either this fact is right and you are wrong, nothing else. See, so this is not diplomatic. It will promote the other person to be on the defensive right away. Because what? The moment you're threatening their sense of pride, their sense of importance, or threatening their belief systems or belief structures, you're threatening their ego. And when you threaten their ego, our natural defense mechanism is to be on the guard and to want to protect ourselves. So it becomes confrontational and hostile, not cooperative. But imagine this. Even if you want to say the same thing, the same fact or the same opinion, but you say it this way. I may be wrong here, but my experiences has shown me that. Or, I admit I'm frequently wrong on this subject, but it appears to me that. Or, I don't know much about this topic, but I think that. Or, I understand that. Or, I imagine that, A, B, C, D, E. Or, it appears to me that this is the case, right? I conceive that, right? See, all these wordings, how do you think they would be felt by the other person? They are more disarming. They are more cooperative. They are more humble. They are more modest. You are subtly, on a very subtle level, you're also communicating to them that, look, you're not here to demonize them. You're not here to prove that they are wrong and that you're right. That's not your goal. Your goal here is to develop a better, clearer, more accurate understanding of the situation. And therefore, by that very nature, you are already inviting them as part of your team. It's you working against the problem, not your egos working against each other. That's an important point to stress. You're inviting them to work together to find the solution to how can we look at this in a more well-rounded way to understand the facts better, because not everybody has all the correct facts on any given subject. If we are humble enough to admit this, they will pick up on that too. And by definition, it takes the fight right out of them. You're not coming off in a way that you're accusing them. You're not coming off in a way that you're insulting their intelligence, you see, insulting their judgment, you see. Their pride is not as much at stake here, right? So it's really, really important to see that these different approaches can lead to entirely different results. And remember what we talked about in the previous 2 videos, that we all have a longing desire to feel important, to be great. So imagine that you take the first approach and it's confrontational. I am certain that you did this wrong, right? How would that person serve to protect their function of feeling important? In order to feel important, that person must be on the defensive. They must defend themselves, right? Even if they know they're wrong, they will want to defend themselves, right? With other facts, data, and figures, with excuses or etc. Because they have to protect that precious pride. Their feeling of importance is at stake now. And by the way, another point to note is the reason that we think that we may win is very counterintuitive, because oftentimes we may win the argument, we may have short-term victory, but we do not succeed in changing their minds. Because again, the ego's defense mechanism, when you have insulted their intelligence and their judgment, they're going to have to later on, after the argument, find facts and selectively look for facts, reasons, and data to uphold their pre-existing beliefs, because that's the ego's nature. That's the ego's defense mechanism. You have hurt their pride, so they must maintain that by finding some way to fix and patch their old belief systems. That's often what happens, right? Very rarely do we find somebody who is like, oh yeah, I'm actually wrong here. Thanks for pointing that out for me. Very rarely do we find those circumstances. So again, this first way is very confrontational, right? It's not gonna lead to a sentiment of cooperation. But if you take the second way, right? Use more softer words. How will they get their sense of importance? Here's where it's really, really mind-blowing and really, really counterintuitive. Their sense of importance, when you demonstrate or when you start by being humble and you say that I may be wrong here, that actually promotes them to react in a similar fashion, to reciprocate your behavior, to reciprocate your behavior, because they will be able to get their importance only by being more humble as well. Because if they're being more humble, because you have first shown modesty and shown courtesy and tactfulness, they cannot be humble, they cannot be important if they attack you. They can only get that sense of importance if they cooperate with you. You see, that's really counterintuitive, but that's the key takeaway here, right? So this is really powerful. A very small phrase can lead to a very different result, right? You can either create a new enemy or a new friend just from a way that you phrase a wording. And one more really counterintuitive thing here is that if you are wrong, if it's in the case where you are wrong, you know it, admit it quickly, admit that you're wrong quickly, and do it with enthusiasm. Now, Dale Carnegie, in this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, did a really great job in illustrating that. Oftentimes, it's really counterintuitive, but if we first admit that we are wrong, it actually takes the fight out of them, and it promotes them to react by showing more mercy, and more cooperation is possible rather than hostility, right? We all feel that if we admit that we are wrong, then our sense of self and importance is at stake. But oftentimes, evidence has shown over and over again that if we admit that we are wrong first and do it quickly when we have the chance to do so, and do it with enthusiasm, then the other person will react by showing mercy rather than by, saying again that I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. Right? That's how psychology works. Here's an example. To illustrate this point, there was one example given by the book where there's this salesman of a white truck, right? So this salesman was Dale Carnegie's student, and he told this story where he would meet customers, and the customers would criticize the white truck and say why the competitor's truck are better, right? How did this guy react initially before taking these courses and trying to apply these principles? This salesman would get very reactive and would argue back and tell the customer why the customer is wrong, why the competitor's trucks are bad, and why the white truck that he's trying to sell is better, right? And guess what? He always won those arguments, but he put the customer on the defensive, and even if he won those arguments, he never sold his trucks. He actually sold his customers on his competitor's trucks. So he scratched his head, his mind is confused, and he's like, why am I not able to make any sales when I'm telling them that I'm right and they agree that I'm right? So after taking Dale Carnegie's course, he tried to take a different approach to apply these principles. Guess what he did? So next time he had new customers, same thing happened. Customers say that the white truck is bad and that the competitor's trucks are better. What did he do first? He first listened very attentively to the customers' complaints and why the customers saying that the competitor's trucks are better. He even agreed, and he said this, yes, our competitor's trucks are good trucks. What was the effect of doing that? The customer was taken completely off guard and taken by surprise. What this salesman had done was he had admitted to some truth that he saw in the customer's argument, what they're trying to say, and customer's viewpoint. And by doing so, with enthusiasm, he took the fight out of the customer. He took the hostility out of the customer. The customer can no longer derive any sense of satisfaction or any feeling of importance by demonstrating why the white trucks are bad and why other trucks are better. Because it's taking the fight right out of him. The salesman has already agreed. The customer is left, in a checkmate, right? Then after that, the salesman was able to say that, however, our white trucks are good because of reason A, reason B, reason C, and so on. And guess what? It was a much more cooperative nature, a much more cooperative result. The customers were more attentive in listening to what the salesman had to say. And from these techniques, the salesman's sales skyrocketed. From previously, he was barely able to sell anything. Now he's selling his white trucks. So this is the power of dealing with people diplomatically, in a humble way and in a tactful way, right? Another example is in the relationship between an employee and a boss. So the book gave the example of an art collector, right? And the employee was designing some art piece for this art collector, and this guy is very critical. The boss is super duper critical and always criticizing at the smallest mistake. Beforehand, before this employee took Dale Carnegie's course, same thing, similar to the salesman, very reactive, things got into an argument, both sides ended up getting angry at each other. But after taking this course, he tried the counterintuitive move where next time that his boss called him to talk about and criticize his artwork, right, he took the counterintuitive move and admitted his own fault first. And admit to his boss that, yes, I'm sorry, boss, you're absolutely right. This mistake here, this painting here, or this lining here is my mistake. I will go fix it. Guess what happened? It took the fight out of the boss. See, because the boss can no longer get his ego's feeling of importance by criticizing the artwork anymore and telling the other person why they are wrong and why the boss is right. Now the boss has to play the role of showing mercy. So see how counterintuitive this is? And the boss was much more soft, and the result was a much more cooperative result and cooperative communication between two sides. So this is the power of understanding how to handle people, and therefore avoiding arguments is best where you can do it. And most times you can always find a way to avoid arguments. And also there's a deeper sense of satisfaction here. There's a deeper sense of satisfaction in admitting your own faults and your mistakes first. You take the fun out of it from the other person, right? So, do consider these principles that are being shared in the book, but I think they're very, very insightful. So I wanted to share this in today's video. Again, arguments, we never win. You can never truly win an argument. You always end up losing more than you think you can gain. But the key takeaway then is practice. Where can we begin to really practice to embody this? Because theory is one thing, and it's a lot easier to understand the theory, but it's harder to embody the practice, right? Because our own ego as well is going to get in the way. We're going to lose our temper, and quite easily, right? When we're in a disagreement, when we hear somebody say something absurd or which we disagree with, or when they try to defend themselves when we know they made a mistake, it's going to upset us. Because if you can understand the ego and the way it works, we can also see that in a way, we also want to argue back and be more hostile back as a way to protect our sense of self. Say, if they did something wrong, we need to establish that it was them, not us. Or if we hear an absurd idea, we want to correct that idea in order to validate our own, right? In order to validate our own idea. So that's why the ego is always going to get in the way, and this requires practice. I think to really begin, it's useful to try to use these diplomatic terminologies, as discussed earlier, in more softer scenarios, right? In scenarios where you're not really in a disagreement, but you just have a difference of opinion that you can calmly navigate. And try to use these wordings, right? Like, I may be wrong, but I understand that. It appears to me that this is the case. Because you'll start to see that the other person reacts to you more positively. And you'll start to see the value of employing these tactics to come off more humble, more modest, and more tactful. And also, another thing is, I'm sure that we all have somebody in our lives that we feel a little bit annoyed by, right? Usually that's somebody perhaps in our family, right? It's quite common to be annoyed by somebody in our family member. Try to find that one person and try to practice patience with them. When they say something that we think is stupid, when they say something that we think is embarrassing, instead of jumping to correct them, try to observe your own anger rising. Try to control your temper, and if you need to say something, try to use these diplomatic terminologies, right? Because when we really get put in the real test the next time, say you're at the work office, right? Say you're at office and there's a situation where there's a disagreement and you need to say your mind, or you're being accused of doing something wrong and you feel that you need to stand up for yourself or stand up for your team, right? Then these are real tests. But you see how when we practice with safer situations, it trains us to think in the mind of, instead of looking at the other person as your enemy, you're looking at the situation as a team cooperative spirit, right? It's you two against the goal that you want to understand something better, right? And also if you're more humble, you're more modest, you're more diplomatic, you'll notice that people respond to you better, and that will motivate you to continue to try these methods. And you'll see that these are ways that really have an impact in your ability to influence those around you. And also practice patience, right? Because this work takes a lot of patience to do. Our ego is going to want to trigger our temper when we hear our parents say something that we think is stupid, when we hear our siblings say something that we think is silly. Our temper is going to get the better of us, right? So we have to practice patience and try to employ a sympathetic desire to truly understand the other person's point of view first before engaging in a conversation, before being upset and yelling at them or telling them why they are wrong, right? And in order to understand the other person's viewpoint, try to see it just as they see it without using your own judgments or evaluations to do so. That's it for now. I hope you liked this video. If you thought it was valuable, please leave a like for me. Please share the video for me. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube and hit the bell notification button. Or please like my Facebook page if you're watching Konpop on Facebook. And please do share with me in the comments what you thought about this video. What insights were helpful in your ability to navigate disagreements and prevent them from turning into arguments. Or if you have other techniques, please share with me too. I want to hear them. Alright, so please go ahead and share your comments. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. สวัสดีครับ